southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
Lynching has long been a prime example of the hate crimes in the United States. Hate crimes are broadly defined as crimes where the victim is of a different group than the offender, and the crime is motivated by negative feelings the offender has towards the victim. A more complete definition of hate crime is a crime that stems from the perpetrator's stereotyped view of the victim or the victim's community. The perpetrator may wish to punish the victim's community, or put them back in their place. Hate crimes differ from other crimes of aggression because of the view the offender has of the victim and because of the result the crime has on the victim's community. In 1865, following the Emancipation Proclamation, the Ku Klux Klan was formed. Their tactics included cross-burning, lynching, and shooting to death those who were deemed to be against white America. Between 1890 and the 1930s, anti-lynching laws were passed. However, the enforcement of these laws was rarely anything meaningful. This lack of proper enforcement of laws designed to protect minority populations is something that continues to this day. Even if a person is arrested, they may not be tried for a hate crime. The historical habits of neglecting to protect minority populations such as African Americans carries over from Jim Crow times to modern ones. Instead of the overt racism prevalent in that time, there is now a laissez-faire kind of racism. Instead of failing to prosecute anti-black lynchings, there is now a resistance toward policies that may be perceived to benefit minorities. This reluctance increases in places that have a history of crimes such as lynching in their past. Many rely on the police forces and FBI to gather data about the rate of hate crimes as well as information on the perpetrators of hate crimes, even though hate crimes are often underreported as the victim often knows the perpetrator. The data shows that the crimes themselves are often perpetrated by white men around their 30s. Studies have shown that despite the prevalent myths, most hate crimes are motivated by sensation or thrill-seeking. Coming in at smaller rates are the motives of revenge and the motive of saving the world from an undesirable group. The motivations behind hate crimes vary, but the timing of hate crimes, as well as the location, gives indications to the reason behind the actions. Violent hate crimes toward minority and marginalized groups suffer upswings during public events that are widely publicized, such as a trial or a terrorist attack, or times when marginalized groups have made what feels like progress in civil rights. After these instances, crimes against the group considered responsible spike. For example, after 9/11, the number of Islamophobic attacks increased greatly. Hate crime rates also vary based on the makeup of local populations. Studies have found that areas with a larger diverse population tend to have lower rates of hate crimes. Some theories posit that this is due to a familiarizing effect as the two groups get to know each other. However, in these areas, if there have been a history of previous hate crimes, this is not true, especially in areas that have historically had lynchings. In these areas, the previous obvious blind eye towards hate crimes has turned into a lax or mishandled enforcement of policies that are assumed to aid marginalized groups. For example, mandatory arrests during domestic disturbances, a policy designed to help protect battered women, often leads to double arrests of both the woman and her batterer. Laws that call for additional or harsher sentences for crimes deemed hate crimes may give the appearance that these crimes are being taken seriously. Once appropriate enforcement is achieved, the policies can then be reevaluated for their effectiveness, and appropriate changes can be made. Australia's laws specify harsher sentences for hate crimes. However, a study found that the vast majority of men who were charged with a hate crime were men who belonged to a minority group, with white men being very rarely charged. Based on these observations, Further legislation on the sentencing of hate crimes does not seem to be the answer. Harsher sentences either are not charged or are used in ways that are not appropriate. Current laws exist targeting hate crime. However, the inappropriate enforcement is preventing them from being effective. If legislation or policy change to combat hate crime is enforced, it should focus on the proper and appropriate enforcement and training of those who are in charge of enforcing rules. Once appropriate enforcement is achieved, the policies can then be reevaluated for their effectiveness, and appropriate changes can be made.